Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SIL Legal Lounge podcast, Let's Talk Law, a show where we talk about different areas of law and policy in a frank and easy to understand manner so that everyone can end up learning something new. Our topic for today is on the Gaza Flotilla. What happened? Why has it happened? And what exactly does international law say about it? My guests for today are all experts in the topic of human rights law and international humanitarian law. And as always, I'm very, very proud of the fact that they're all alumni of the School of International Law. Brief introductions before we begin today's episode. We start with Ms. Anisa Sarshar, class of 2017. Anisa is a legal research consultant specializing in international law and human rights. She has worked with the British High Commission, the Federal Judicial Academy, the National Commission on the Rights of the Child, and the ICRC. Her work focuses on extradition policy, child protection, refugee rights, and humanitarian law. How are you, Anisa?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a while
I'm
since
glad.
we've had
Yes.
a conversation regarding human rights. I remember your days as
Yes.
a student.
Yeah. And you would really encourage us to pursue that. I remember.
And I'm really glad, I'm just reading some of the work that you've been involved in. Anisa has contributed to several national reports and policy initiatives aimed at strengthening human rights and governance frameworks in Pakistan. So well done. Very proud.
Yeah. I know it sounds impossible even to me when I read it. I'm like, when did I do this?
Now, we always knew you could do this. We are also joined today by Abdullah Ahmed from the class of 2018. Abdullah is a lawyer and graduate of the Masters in Human Rights program at Friedrich Alexander University in Germany. With a background that bridges legal practice, human rights scholarship, and global policy, he is deeply passionate about exploring how law can serve as both a shield and a catalyst for justice in the modern world. How are you, Abdullah?
I'm very well, ma'am. Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Very impressive work that you have been doing. And I'm so glad that you ventured towards academia and research as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And thanks to you for all the support you've always extended.
Very, very happy to have you here. And finally, we have Gul Khoban from the class of 2022. Gul is a protection lawyer at the Society for Human Rights and Prisoners Aid. She is currently working on a project of the International Organization for Migration, a UN agency focusing on migration displacement and the movement of vulnerable communities facing persecution. So, an ideal candidate for today's topic. How are you, Gul?
I'm fine, ma'am. How are you?
I am well and very happy to see that you are so dedicated towards safeguarding the rights and dignity of displaced individuals. Very, very happy to see this. So
Thank you,
let's just
ma'am.
jump into the conversation because there I actually got a lot of questions from people when they found out that we were having this episode. So let's just start with the most obvious question, which is what exactly was the stated purpose and mission of the flotilla which was headed for Gaza? I know everybody is familiar with what has been happening in Gaza for the past 2 years now, but let's just break it all down. So, what exactly is happening with this flotilla mission? I'd like to start with Anisa.
So basically, Flotilla is the biggest coalition of ships and fleets going towards Gaza to challenge the blockade as well as bring the humanitarian aid to them. Um, I know we'll go into the history of why it's happening, but just to give the facts, it has around 40 to 50 vessels going, and it has around 500 participants, and there are about 35 to 40 countries involved in it, and it is the biggest one in history of flotilla. Their mission that they have stated is that it is to challenge the blockade, to show solidarity with the people of Palestine, and to bring humanitarian aid, which they are, of course, lacking of, as we all see.
All right. And I think the reason why a lot of people are also following this very closely this time, even more closely than they, were before, is because that there is a Pakistani representative on this mission as well. Our own Senator Mushtaq Ahmed, I believe, is also part of the mission. So, Gul, you are working for displaced people. You have dealt with humanitarian issues related to migration and so on. What exactly do you see happening here with the flotilla mission? Why is this so close to your heart?
Flotilla is in Spanish word and samud is the Arabic word. It means to solidarity and to steadfast for some mission. And as the name suggests, this is what they are doing. There are 40 vessels, more than 500 people. We have 8 people from Pakistan, including doctors and our politicians and some other people and lawyers. What we usually miss is that this flotilla is consisting of lawyers. And what's their job in the flotilla is to record evidence, the evidence that Israel is doing against something that are against international law and maritime law, which they'll record and they plan to send it to ICJ, International Court of Justice, so they can have a strong case. So it's not just the humanitarian aid. They are working in a long-term process. This will help not just for the aid or for the social awareness, it will help them legally. So it's a bigger project. It's not just the aid. Aid is a very small part of this mission. And what the aid is basically, it's mostly food and medical supplies. What the Israeli stance for this is that they are carrying some things that related to war. Like they have mentioned it so many times that they have small scissors which are used as medical purposes, but they are labeling all those things, the food, the plates, the scissors, as something that are means to warfare. Their stance is that it's something that is related to Hamas, that is something related to warfare, which is totally against the reality and which we have been observing. And what's most important for this Samud flotilla is that it has given a lot of social awareness.
Yeah.
It's not like it's just humanitarian aid. A lot of social awareness has been given because of this flotilla. It was not so prominent before this, but the flotilla helped all the general people, all the people who were not involved in this Gaza and Israeli conflict, and they have now known that what are the atrocities that's happening around that part.
Okay. So, Abdullah, my question for you would be, since you have worked extensively on international human rights, that is your topic of interest as well. So, under international law in general, is it lawful to intercept vessels in international waters?
Well, generally speaking, it's the rule says no. The ships on the high seas are under the exclusive jurisdiction of their flag state, meaning whatever the state they represent, under the UN laws on seas. The Article 92 explicitly says that the flag state has the jurisdiction over the ship particularly. So in that regard, the general rule would be to say no. But then, and there are, in terms of the law itself, for example, the Saint Remo manual, जो कि international law है जो apply करता है seas पे, it has various sections and articles which talks about intercepting a vessel. Normally, it's rule of thumb is you cannot intercept unless there are certain conditions that have been fulfilled. And in the situation of flotilla, the law applies कि you cannot under Article 92 of the law on seas of the UN. The exclusive jurisdiction is with the flag state, and only they can be intercepted if there's a valid blockade, and the vessel was clearly warned, and the interception was minimum necessary force and ensures humane treatment.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point which you raised. So you're saying that the vessel can be, sort of intercepted under limited
Yes,
circumstances if there is
absolutely,
any threat, as you said,
absolutely,
and if
absolutely.
there are, there's minimal intervention.
Yes,
So
absolutely,
does the Israeli government have this claim that there was a threat from the members in the flotilla? So based
exactly,
on
and
that,
that's.
are we saying that they complied with international law?
I mean, technically, there was no threat at the first place because it's officially known that the flotilla carries people who are lawyers, activists throughout the world, different continents, European, Asian, etc., etc. So they're not armed people, so to say, right? And so there's no threat as such. Or usi mein, the fact is that Article 1 or 2 of the Saint Remo manual, which is the law on the seas, it says the blockade has to be unlawful if its purpose is to starve civilians or deny them objects essential for survival, and that's very important. And
Yeah.
that's the whole idea. If you look at Flotilla, it's basically purely humanitarian cause, right? And it signifies protest and help for the people. And blocking it just says how Israel, the intentions of Israel, which obviously are clear at the first place, but it also consolidates कि वो करना क्या चाह रहे हैं eventually.
So the way I would explain this to a layman is, so UN has certain conventions that are for general times, that is all year long, and anyone who is party to it, anyone who is party to the UN, they have to follow it generally, right? So UNCLOS, those are the ones that are during peacetime. Throughout all the time, you have to listen to it. That's the one that says that the flag bearer of that country, the country owns that ship. It's like, the way I would explain it is, if a Pakistani ship is on international waters with the Pakistani flag representing Pakistan, not even representing, the fact that Pakistan owns it, the way we would explain it is, it's like a piece of Pakistan floating in international waters. Nobody has claim to it other than Pakistan. So if somebody else tries to overtake it, cause some kind of issue with it, it would be like attacking a part of Pakistan, which that would be the significance of it, which is a big, big thing. And that's what UNCLOS says. But that's during general times. This is peace times, which is generally going on. The San Remo manual is applied during wartime. But the wartime has to have a that has its own criteria. This is what Israel and IOF and all IDF and IOF, they're all claiming that right now the San Remo manual is in play. Okay. But they don't meet the criteria. So they
why don't they meet the criteria?
So the three things that they have to, the three criteria they don't meet is San Remo, since it's not, this is, the general rule is UNCLOS, right? The exception is San Remo. You can't have the exception play out for 17 years. This blockade is not new. It's 17 years of a blockade. You can't have a blockade that goes on for this long. Even though temporary is not defined under San Remo, it is something that everyone agrees on, that this blockade is not temporary. And it is for, the other thing is, it prohibits starvation. San Remo itself prohibits starvation. So even though Israel is trying to claim this as their defense, they don't actually meet the criteria of the defense that they're using themselves. So even if we ignore that, even if we put them under just San Remo, they're not meeting the criteria. They're supposed to allow humanitarian aid as well. And they're supposed to have no discrimination when they're allowing humanitarian aid.
So even in the exception which they are claiming, you are saying that they're not fulfilling the requirements.
Yes, even the defense they're using, they themselves are not meeting.
All right. Okay, so my next question is, I think the answer is obvious, but I would like you to, sort of answer this from, a legal perspective, because you know how, especially with this issue, it's only normal that we react with emotion because honestly, things that are unfolding before us, this isn't something which you can remain neutral to for very long. But I would like to, sort of have a very strict legal perspective on this, because I think people need to know that what does the law say about this. So the question is, could the interception or the detention of these activists be characterized as a human rights violation or a war crime? And I know all three of you will have opinions on this. So I'd like to start with Abdullah.
So in terms of the question, I think there are human rights violations and there are war crimes at the same time. Obviously, it depends on the circumstances and the events. But potentially, I think there are lots of human rights violations that we're looking at today with how Israel has acted with the flotilla. For example, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, the Article 9, it says arbitrary detention. So we're looking at arbitrary detention and how Israel has done so far with the activists that are really carrying the help and the medicines and stuff like that, and deprivation of liberty without fair trial. जिस तरह से उन्होंने लोगों को रखा है. And we've seen reports, the press, the BBC, and other press reports have come out. The fact that they've been persecuted, जिन को रखा जा रहा है मुश्किल में, and all of that stuff. That's also violation or inhuman treatment.
And more reports are coming out now from the
Absolutely,
activists,
absolutely,
as they're getting
absolutely.
released. Yeah.
As they're going back home, for example, the Swedish Thunberg, जो वो activist है, उसने बताया कि the way she was treated.
Yeah.
So that's also a very clear violation of Article 7 and other. I mean, there are lots of instruments जिनकी हम violation की बात कर सकते हैं, but specifically International Convention जो है civil and political rights की बात कर सकते हैं. उसके बाद हम UDHR जो Declaration of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, उसके articles की बात कर सकते हैं. तो इस तरह के बहुत सारे instruments हैं which do actually prove that there have been potential human rights violations.
Yeah.
The freedom of movement or peaceful assembly का जो violation है वो भी बहुत apparent है, बहुत simple है. War crimes जो हैं, now that's very arguable और इसमें different opinions हो सकते हैं. But in my opinion, when we talk about war crimes, जो इस situation में particularly, I think unlawful deportation or confinement की जो बात है, that's very very important here. उसके बाद जो starvation of civilians है, and the Article 8 of the Rome Statute, which it talks about the method of warfare, which talks about starvation of civilians.
Yeah.
So यहाँ पे when you're blocking this humanitarian cause, you're not eventually a bigger cause के लिए it's sort of a war crime or which can be talked about under the Rome Statute. And finally, I think when you're causing great suffering or serious injuries to people on the flotilla, the people who are going और उनके साथ जो injuries हुई हैं and all of that stuff, not just physical but also mental as well.
Yeah.
That's, I think, you could actually, under the Rome Statute, it could be arguably said as a war crime as well.
Yeah. All right. Gul, I know you're going to have a strong opinion on this. So what would you say?
This is a very grave situation. Like up till yesterday, more than 680,000 people have been killed as of the count till yesterday, till 7th October 2025. So it's almost 7 lakh people, almost 1 million people. And a lot of them have been starved. So it's not just against international law, it can be defined as warfare because they are starving people, they are starving children. And we have a lot of laws against the way a war should be conducted. We recently have two Security Council's resolution against them. Like there's nothing in international law, you cannot have anything more than Security Council's resolution. And we have got two of the resolution that prohibits the starvation that's going on. Then we have the International Law of International Court of Justice, and they are giving continuously, they are terming is at genocide. So we cannot ignore the fact that it's not just international law that's been violated, humanitarian law that's been violated, it's just genocide that's going on. We cannot put this aside.
So I just want to ask you one thing. So if there is a genocide, like you say, according to international organizations, that's going on, so people who are then coming to help the victims of those genocide, the activists who we're speaking about, so detention of those activists, would that classify as a war crime or not?
Okay, ma'am. One thing more, we must put this in mind that we are Pakistanis, and as on the Pakistani passport, we have it has been written that we do not recognize Israel.
No.
So what's our stance is that what's our flotilla, basically I'm talking about Pakistan, that what's our stance is that we are not going to Israel to break the blockage. We are going to Gaza for humanitarian aid. And this brings a major plus point to our legal point. Like we are not even considering Israel. We are going to Gaza for warfare, and they have been attacking in regard to Pakistan. They have been attacking Pakistanis on high seas, which are not covered by any law except international law, and for people who are being starved by Israel. And we even do not recognize Israel. We are going towards Gaza. So that not only comes in against international law, in the war crime, and a direct attack on other independent countries, because they are attacking us on war crimes. And this flotilla should have been much more. Like, it's a pity that all the luxurious yachts and they are being sent. Although if all the governments and they had come together, it would have been more impactful. And we must keep this in mind that this is not what it should have been. Could have been more impactful if the governments came together and they supported the flotilla, because this is what's a very, very minor act that all the civilians are doing. And instead of having such big amount of money with all the Muslim world, and still we are just, but still the civilian society, they are putting their efforts, but it is not what it should have been.
And I
We must
believe a
put
lot of states also, they withdrew their, their support for the flotillas that they were initially,
Yeah.
sort of protecting as well. I read something about
and
that.
the flotilla were not
Yeah.
even in good working conditions.
Nisa, what would you say about this?
My answer to your direct question is that yes, that is a humanitarian crime, that is against human rights. IHL does not provide that you can harm, torture, starve, or not give medical intervention to the civilians that you have intercepted or even detained. They have rights as well under the Vienna, under the Geneva, under UNCLOS, under San Remos. You have to give them basic human rights, which were not provided to the participants, as more stories are coming out. They were not allowed to contact their legal representatives. They were not allowed to tell anyone where they were. They were not, the medicine was taken away from them, which is a big thing. There were diabetic patients coming and telling that medicine was, there were people with broken legs that were telling that the soldiers were purposely hitting doors on their legs to make sure they were in pain. So these are civilians that they're torturing, that they have detained. So yeah, so it is a humanitarian crime.
Okay, so now the most obvious question would be, K, what role can international actors play in supporting or opposing the flotilla? I'm talking about, the United Nations, different NGOs, the media, for instance. So, Gul, we'll start with you because, you are working with different NGOs and agencies as well, both national and international. What do you think? What should happen?
Security Council and General Assembly, they are the two main powerful bodies that could impact or impede what Israel is doing. If they had taken a decisive step, this would not have been uh, so grave. The situation would not have been so grave, or it would not have been so drastic toward all the world. But unfortunately, the Security Council and General Assembly has not, they have failed doing so, taking a decisive act. And what this time needs is a decisive act, a legal act, something against the atrocities of Israel. And that's not something that's related to emotion. This is what legal international law requires. This is what UN was made for.
Yeah.
If you cannot stop a genocide, then there is no need of such a big body. This body was made because after World War, after the genocide that happened, after the Holocaust, and now it's happening again. But unfortunately, no such decisive act has been taken for the Palestinian cause or for the starvation that's happening. And this is what legal international law requires to. It is what needs to be done.
That's where I get confused because there have been legal sanctions on them. ICJ has just cleared Netanyahu to be a war criminal. This is proper genocide. It's been declared that this is a man-made starvation, again declared officially. This is all legally that they're actually saying, but nobody's arresting Netanyahu based on what UN is saying or ICJ is saying. Nobody is actually doing anything because this makes us see that some countries are above the law that other countries that are not so powerful have to adhere to, which shakes our belief in the legal system a bit.
Yeah, I think all four of us sitting here today, because we all have at some point studied international law, and it's a sobering reality. It's a disappointing reality, actually, to realize that, everything that we have studied, in theory, it's all there, but when it's playing out in front of you in real time, there is literally no effective resolution, and there are no effective sanctions, like Gul also pointed out. Abdullah, you wanted to say
Yes,
something?
yes. Thank you very much. And I actually think, I mean, when we talk about the UN, it's a classic example today of a useless institution because we've seen so much happening in Gaza. There are reports, international reports, confirmed reports of babies, women, and what has the UN done so far? And when we talk about the legal situation of what legal options do we have, I do not think we have any options because the fact is, I mean, it's the same states, it's the same UN which has talked about the sovereignty of a country, and the whole argument that Israeli government or Netanyahu, for example, talks about is the fact that they're a sovereign country. So the actions they take, we can't really take a legal action against the state, for example. Israel is a state itself, right? And even despite the fact that the ICJ and it says बहुत clearly that Netanyahu is a war criminal, or the
But
fact
what
that
effect
it was
has that
innocent.
made? That hasn't made any
Exactly,
effect. Yes.
exactly nothing, nothing. I mean, Netanyahu, what he's done so far as a result, he doesn't fly over EU airspace, right? Because he's scared he might be arrested. But that's that. But nothing more has happened. And frankly, I even doubt anything will eventually happen. It is actually going to be a political solution at the end of the day, where countries which have powers, for example, the US or other states, it has to be resolved through dialogue. I do not think it has a legal solution, so to say. I mean, it sounds pretty ideal, very utopian to say कि कोई legal solution हो जाएगा. For example, जो Israel ने किया है, they would be held accountable in any way. I do not think, practically speaking, because we have international law. But international law is actually, frankly speaking, it is there, but it has no really, application and significance in matters like these. हमने देखा है कभी कुछ हुआ नहीं है.
True, but I think that
Mhm.
I don't know. I forgot one of you actually said this during this recording that some countries it seems are then above the law. So
Yes,
international law is
actually,
picking and
and
choosing who to support.
that is very true, and that is the practical side of law.
Yeah.
जिसके पास थोड़ी सी might है वो right है. So the US, for example, whatever they want to do, they do, and they have justification. Similarly, Israel is with the US, and they feel like they can do whatever they want to do, and they don't even care what laws are. So frankly, I mean, to conclude my answer, I do not actually think that there would be a legal solution to whatever is happening. Israel would continue to do whatever they want to do. The people are shouting their lungs, and they don't even, care about it. Eventually, this has to happen through dialogue. I mean, we have international law, but I doubt it would really come, handy to resolve this particular situation as such.
So to
But
sum
I
up what everybody has said, you're saying that they're breaking the law clearly. So international law doesn't support any of the actions which are currently taking place, and so the international institutions have technically they have issued their verdicts that whatever is happening is unlawful. But practically speaking, so you're all saying that nothing is happening at this point.
I
At least
I
that's
would
my
like
opinion.
to end this exact question on a more positive note because this is something I read on the South African media, right? Because South Africa and African countries use UN in a really nice way. Like, I really like the way they bring people, they were the only ones a year ago who had the backbone to actually go ahead and sue Israel and actually bring them to justice. And this is what I read that someone in their one of their journals had written. Journalists had written. It said that if right now the only thing we do have is the UN and the international law. IHL is the only thing we have. If we give up on it in the middle of all of this, this is us admitting defeat, and this is us taking away the one thing that Gaza, Israel, is Palestine, and Gaza. This is the only place we can win right now because other than armed conflict, that all the countries, and we go into World War III, right? So if we accept defeat, that yeah, some countries are above the others, which we do, technically it is the reality, but I don't think we should give into it. I don't think we should stop fighting where we actually have the chance to fight. Fine if the thing is stacked against us,
but I still don't think that we should get back. We should move back from all of this. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I think
I get
it
it.
is.
So basically, at least keep trying to reach that ideal of justice and equality and, all the aims that have been laid out by
And use what
international
you
law.
have right now.
Yeah.
That's
I
it.
agree.
Use what you have. Like that's all we have. This
Yeah.
is what
Absolutely.
happened World War One में. World War One से पहले we did have laws in place कि world wars कैसे होनी चाहिए. World War One के middle में we all saw I think World War One के middle में every country saw that those rules were never applied. So after the war ended is when UN started, because all the countries collectively decided that they were like, okay, we need to adhere to some rules that are actually applicable. Before that, this is exactly what happened.
Right. Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. But to sum up what all of you basically said, I think despite all that we've spoken about, like some of us, we feel that there is no change which is happening, and as upsetting as that is the sobering reality at this point. But the mere fact that ordinary citizens took up this initiative. They risked their lives, they risked everything, and they actually set out on a mission literally to hand over food and medical supplies to a starving population. I think that in itself, that speaks volumes. That is perhaps the loudest answer that there is, that if states aren't going to do anything, it's this collective human will that actually wants to strive towards something better, that actually wants to strive towards decency. That is getting up and doing something. So, although, like Gul also mentioned, it was a very small project. It should have been a lot bigger and a lot more ambitious. But maybe, perhaps, this is how it's going to begin. And this is how awareness begins. And one can only hope that better sense prevails and justice prevails.
And if we follow international law as it is, if we don't pick and choose and apply it to the world,
That's a very good way of explaining it. Don't pick and choose international law. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as lawyers, we have to use the tools that we have. And this is all we have to have hope in what is in front of us. The cards might be stacked against us, but we have facts in our corner.
Despite the fact that we can all criticize the UN, we can criticize international law, the application, the severity of the situation requires all of us to speak. I think there's still a way, and international law is the way, the UN is the way, despite its defects, despite the thing that we haven't really been able to do well. But I do think there's still hope, and the people of Gaza would eventually see better days with
Inshallah.
all of us collectively, helping in whatever way we can.
Inshallah. But thank you so much. This was a sobering discussion, but I think one that was needed. And let's hope that very soon we see better days. And as Abdullah said, the people of Palestine see better days. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to everyone who was watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us and we will try and have another session to answer some of your questions. Thank you so much and Allah Hafiz.